Welcome back to the channel, where stories breathe life and life teaches lessons. She was only a girl when her world shifted, her smile still young and bright, but the air around her carried a strange chill. Her father had remarried, and with that came the woman who wore sweet words in public but sharp ones in private. The girl tried to stay cheerful, tried to hold on to her little joys, helping in the kitchen, chasing chickens in the yard, or carrying water from the stream. But every step felt watched, measured, weighed, as though nothing she did was ever enough. The stepmother's eyes often carried an unspoken grudge, like the girl's existence was a crime she had not committed. "You are lazy," she would say, even when the girl's hands were blistered from scrubbing floors. "Ungrateful," she hissed, even after the girl had given up her own share of food. Yet the girl kept quiet, swallowing words the way she swallowed her tears, letting silence shield her from the storm. But life has a way of planting seeds in hidden soil. While her stepmother thought she was breaking her, she was unknowingly shaping her. The girl learned to endure, learned to rise before dawn and keep moving even when her back ached. She learned to smile through pain, though that smile sometimes trembled at the edges. At night, lying on her raffia mat, she would stare at the cracked ceiling, whispering to herself that one day things would be different. She didn't know how. She didn't know when. But she carried a quiet faith that her story wasn't finished. Her stepmother laughed one evening as neighbors gathered, painting the girl as useless before them all. The girl lowered her head, but inside, something stirred, not anger, not hate, but a quiet knowing that life had more in store for her than this shame. She didn't argue. She didn't shout. She simply held on, because deep down, though the world seemed unfair, she believed tomorrow carried a different script. And tomorrow was already on its way. Morning in the compound carried the smell of firewood smoke and the chatter of birds, but for the girl it was always the sound of commands. Before the first rooster crowed, her stepmother's voice pierced the silence. "Stand up, lazy bones." She would drag herself from the mat, still heavy with sleep, and fetch water from the stream while the sky was yet gray. Other children her age ran freely, their laughter echoing in the distance, their bare feet chasing each other down the dusty road. She heard them and longed to join, but her stepmother's eyes reminded her that freedom was not her portion. Her mornings were filled with pounding yam, washing clothes until her knuckles burned, sweeping a compound that seemed never clean enough. Sometimes, when her father returned from the farm, she thought of telling him. She thought of saying, "Papa, I am tired, Papa, she treats me like a stranger." But her father was blinded by the woman's sweetness in his presence. Her stepmother knew how to wear smiles like jewelry, dazzling the man who thought he had found peace. So the girl kept quiet, carrying her pain like a hidden load. One day, while she fetched firewood in the bush, her stepmother followed and whispered words heavy with venom. "You will never rise above me. As long as I live, you will remain beneath my feet." The girl said nothing, only bent to gather sticks. But her heart trembled, and tears slid silently down her cheeks, mixing with the dust on her face. Still, something inside her refused to break. She spoke to herself in whispers, reminding her heart that storms did not last forever. She looked at the sky, wide and endless, and felt small, yet somehow protected. Though her hands were rough, and her back bent from endless work, her spirit stood tall in secret. The stepmother believed she had crushed her, but life was writing another script, one neither of them could see. In her silence, the girl's strength grew roots. And in her tears, her future began to form, waiting for the day it would bloom. The compound was always alive with noise, but inside the girl's heart there was often silence. She had learned the art of speaking less, for words could easily be twisted against her. Her stepmother knew how to sharpen gossip like a blade, and neighbors, eager for drama, would listen. "That girl," they would murmur, "she is troublesome." Yet none of them had ever seen her raise her voice. One afternoon, after pounding yam until her palms throbbed, the girl sat quietly under the mango tree at the edge of the yard. The shade gave her a small comfort, and she let her eyes wander toward the sky. She watched clouds drift like wandering spirits, and in them she imagined a different life. A life where she was free, where her worth was not questioned, where her laughter could rise without fear. Her stepmother's voice cut through the air. "You idle girl, sitting as if you are a queen." The woman's laughter followed, mocking and cruel. The girl rose slowly, dusting her wrapper, and without a word, returned to the chores. Her silence was not weakness, it was survival. But survival has its own cost. At night, she often dreamt of her mother, whose face she barely remembered. She dreamt of gentle hands, of lullabies hummed in the dark, of warmth that had long disappeared. She would wake with her eyes wet, staring at the cracked ceiling as if answers might fall from it. Her stepmother, however, grew bolder. She found joy in testing the girl's endurance, giving her tasks impossible for one person, waiting for her to fail. But the girl, thin and weary, found strength in hidden places. She would finish every duty, though her body ached, though her eyes burned with exhaustion. And when she laid down at night, she whispered to herself, "This is not forever." It was a fragile hope, but it was hers. And even in the shadows of her suffering, that hope began to shine like a faint light, small but steady, refusing to go out. The girl's strength was quiet, but it unsettled her stepmother. No matter what she threw at her, the child endured. It was as if hardship had become her second skin. Yet, the woman was not done. One day, she called her before a group of neighbors who sat under the shade of an udala tree. With a voice loud enough for all to hear, she said, "This girl is cursed. That is why everything she touches turns to dust." The words cut deep, and the neighbors nodded, some whispering among themselves. Shame burned in the girl's chest, but she stood still, her eyes fixed on the ground. She did not defend herself, not because she had no words, but because her silence spoke louder than their gossip. Later that evening, after the neighbors had left, her stepmother handed her a calabash filled with dirty water. "Take this to the king's palace and tell him it is palm wine." The girl hesitated, her heart pounding, but she obeyed. Carrying the calabash on her head, she walked the long road, her bare feet kicking up dust. At the palace, guards stopped her, amused by her nervousness. When she finally stood before the king, she knelt and placed the calabash at his feet. The king lifted it, sniffed, and frowned. "This is no palm wine. Who sent you with this insult?" The girl's lips trembled, but she found her voice. "My stepmother, my lord." The court grew silent. The king studied her, her thin frame, her weary eyes, the bruises of labor on her hands. He saw not defiance, but endurance carved into her very being. With a wave of his hand, he ordered the guards to let her go. "Child," he said gently, "your truth will one day be seen." She left the palace with her heart both heavy and strangely light. For the first time, someone had looked beyond her suffering and seen her worth. Her stepmother, however, had no idea what seed she had just planted. When she returned from the palace, her stepmother's eyes searched her face for defeat. She expected tears, shame, and perhaps even punishment from the king. But the girl walked in with quiet calm, her expression unreadable. The woman's heart sank, though she masked it with anger. "So, you went and embarrassed me, yet they spared you? Don't worry, your day will come." The girl said nothing. She bent down, picked up a broom, and began sweeping the compound as though the world had not just tried to break her. Each stroke of the broom carried a rhythm, steady and patient, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. But change was already moving like wind, unseen yet powerful. Days later, a messenger from the palace arrived at their compound. His presence drew neighbors out of their houses, their curiosity buzzing in the air. "The king requests the presence of the young girl," the messenger declared. Her stepmother's smile froze. "What business does the king have with her?" she demanded. The messenger's eyes hardened. "The king's word is not to be questioned." The girl followed him, her heart pounding with both fear and hope. When she entered the palace courtyard, the king sat waiting. He looked at her not as a servant or a burden, but as someone marked by destiny. "I have thought about you," he said. "Your silence, your strength, they speak louder than words. From today, you will not return to that house as a slave. You will stay here, under my protection." The girl fell to her knees, tears spilling freely at last. The weight of years lifted from her shoulders. She had endured the fire, and now she stood in its light. Back at the compound, her stepmother paced in disbelief. The neighbors whispered among themselves, their judgments shifting like leaves in the wind. The girl they had once pitied had stepped into a future none of them imagined. Destiny had finally shown its hand, and the story was only beginning. Life in the palace was like stepping into another world. The girl, who once fetched water barefoot before dawn, now woke to the sound of palace drums and the smell of rich meals being cooked in the royal kitchen. At first, she felt out of place. The marble floors beneath her feet, the bright fabrics, the carved pillars, all seemed too grand for someone who had lived in shadows. But the king's words echoed in her heart, "You will not return as a slave." The other servants whispered about her, some with envy, some with curiosity. "Who is she?" they asked. "How did she catch the king's eye?" But the girl kept to herself, working quietly, her humility shining even brighter in the palace. One morning, the king's daughter approached her. Unlike the stepmother who spat insults, this princess smiled gently and said, "Come, walk with me." Together they strolled through the gardens, where flowers bloomed in wild colors and peacocks strutted proudly. The princess listened as the girl spoke of her life, her struggles, her silence. For the first time, she poured out her heart without fear of mockery. "You are stronger than you know," the princess said softly. "The palace is not your prison, it is your beginning." Meanwhile, back in the village, her stepmother fumed. The neighbors who once laughed with her now whispered against her. "She treated the girl like dirt," they said, "yet see where the girl is now." The woman's pride began to rot, her laughter replaced with bitterness. But the girl, unaware of the gossip, blossomed in her new home. Each day, her confidence grew, her laughter returned like a long-lost song. She no longer whispered to cracked ceilings at night, instead, she lifted her face to the stars, grateful for the strange path that had led her here. The same neighbors who once watched her shame now prepared to witness her rise. Word spread quickly across the land that the girl once mocked in the village now lived under the king's protection. Market women repeated her story between sales, children whispered it while chasing kites, and men under the udala tree shook their heads in disbelief. "Truly," they said, "no one knows tomorrow." In the palace, her life took a turn she never imagined. The king gave her a place among his household, treating her like a daughter. She learned to read, her fingers tracing letters that once looked like strange marks. She learned to speak boldly, her voice no longer trembling with fear. Every day, the broken pieces of her past began to weave into something whole. The princess became her closest companion, guiding her gently into this new life. They laughed together in the gardens, shared secrets in the quiet of the halls, and dreamed of futures bright and full. For the first time, the girl's laughter rose freely, unchained from sorrow. Back in the village, her stepmother withered. The neighbors who once clapped at her insults now avoided her. They looked at her with scorn, for she had mocked a child whom destiny had chosen. Her pride collapsed under the weight of her own cruelty. One day, the king called the girl before his council. With all eyes upon her, he spoke, "This child, once despised, has shown endurance greater than gold. From this day, she will be honored in this palace." The hall erupted in applause, and tears filled her eyes. She remembered the nights on the raffia mat, whispering to cracked ceilings. She remembered the rain, the hunger, the laughter of neighbors. And she realized, every tear had watered her destiny, every pain had been a stone on the path leading here. Her stepmother had tried to bury her, but in doing so, she had planted her. And now, she stood tall, a tree whose branches reached toward the sky. Indeed, life had other plans.